Konsachi my tomodachis, and welcome to Sachi Studies episode 02. For this episode, I looked at a music video cover of Unknown Mother Goose composed by the late Waka. This cover was done by the artists Hanabasami Kyou, Shishigami Leona, and the now retired Sasugano Ruki and Roki. The original video was done by 3-2 from the now retired Ruki project. My aim for these videos is for me to analyze and learn by recreating effects in videos that I like and think are cool. I also try to aim for creating something original using what I learned, but unfortunately due to time constraints, I decided to cut that out and commit to making the recreation in as much depth as I could given my self-determined time frame. Okay, so before we begin watching the piece at one-time speed, there's some things to note. So there's a lot of distortions in this video, for example, right here. And this is generally created by using some kind of like splitting of RG and B, as you can see in this exact frame. And distortions, for me, I used square wave distort to try and create something similar, and then added a lot of noise, so that because it's not a clean image. Another important thing to note for context is that each character has 3 versions. Well, not each, but most. So Kyou, for example, she has a regular art version, she has a minimal version, and then later on we'll see Leona and Roki have a transparent version. And the distortion is often used to transition between the different versions of themselves, and also to invert the color scheme in a lot of the cases in this sequence. So let's go through one-time speed the whole original piece. Okay, so now let's step through it piece by piece. So first thing, Kyou Hanabasami is coming away from us. Z position, blur reflection with text coming in behind. Note that the background's white, the bar is black, the text is white. Then, whoosh, distortion. So like I mentioned, RGB split, noise, and some distortion effects. And then inverted. So now black background, white bar, black text with minimal version of Kyou. Another distortion again to switch back to normal. And then switch back to minimal. So let's... And the next, we kind of do the same thing again, but with Ruki, with slightly different timing. So when I was doing this part again, I kind of copy-pasted it, but adjusted the timing. So again, starts with the white background, distortions to invert and switch to minimal, distortions to switch to black and to normal, and the distortions to switch back to white background with minimal as the text fades out from behind. For the text on both times, I believe it's centered anchor text with tracking increasing. So if you look closely at the text, it starts closer to the middle character and moves outward. Next is, I think, the most interesting part of the sequence, or rather, it was very interesting to reproduce. So there's a circle with a heart. And it's moving away from us, so Z position, with some text that's partnered to it. All of a sudden, boom, invert. Okay, let's go. Invert. And right at this frame of the inversion, lines appear with another line, lyric, and then it splits into 3. So this background circle heart thing itself has got Z position and Z rotation. And then boom. This layer splits into 3 with this text appearing and lines appearing over top. And inversion of all of the layers, so white and black are now inverted for every layer here. And one thing that was really interesting to do was to recreate the splitting. So how is this done? So the way I recreated this was basically you have the one animation, which is the heart and circles moving back with the text. That's like one group, one pre-composition. And then basically you create masks, which are like cutting up the image, or the composition in this case, into 3 equal parts. So as you can see, there's a part here in the top left, a part here in the top right, and then another huge chunk here in the bottom right. So they're actually, they duplicated it, and they're showing all 3 at the same time. But they've adjusted the positions to make it look kind of off-kilter, off-center. It's not matching the original image anymore, to help demonstrate this feeling of like brokenness. And all meanwhile, the thing in the background itself is still animated, moving in a circle and rotating. The way it works is it's basically like having one video, and then you've kind of cloned it and then cut and pasted it so that it's not mismatching. It's not mismatching with itself. And I think that was a very interesting effect. And that was something that I was very excited to reproduce, and was really happy that I kind of understood it. After this section, jump cuts to the heart with text that is center anchored, that's tracking outward. As you can see, the text is expanding. This carries on throughout the whole section, with the text continuously having wider and wider tracking. The inversions also happen, so there's 2 inversions here: black heart, white heart, and black heart, white heart. To do this portion, one thing that was very useful was the effect called the CC Tyler effect. It basically, like as the name implies, tiles the original composition. So 1 heart, now there's 4 hearts, and now there's 9 hearts. For me, I just left it at 9, and whatever was the one after that, I can't remember, because it's easier to do and save time on the recreation. Ends with 1 heart, the inverted, and then boom, jump cut back to white background with left anchored text tracking outward, and then Roki is going to appear from the top. So there's blur here. She's starting as the minimal version. Distortion effects once again, so RGB shifts, noise, all that good stuff. And inversion, so now the background's black, text is white, and now she's transitioned to the regular art version. Transition again, so inversion of the text back to black. Now she's changed to minimal version, and now there's a faux transparent background as the background. So this time the background isn't actually inverting, but rather just changing to something else that's completely different, which I thought was really interesting. Boom, 1 more distortion, and then things are inverted back once again. So now the text is white, the background's now black, and now it's kind of like she's a transparent character. And then boom, 1 more switch back to change everything back to normal. After that, it's basically the same thing again, but with Leona. Coming up from the bottom. Again, setting minimal, transitions normal with white text, black background. Boom, transitions to minimal with transparent background. Transitions to black background, white text with transparent Leona. Transitions back to normal. And then lastly, it's black background with blurred text that becomes more and more visible with a light circle in the background. And the text here expands its tracking and also turns from a white color to gray, while the circle in the background is lighting everything up around it. And that's all the effects from start to finish, or at least the majority of them that I probably caught and recreated. So let's watch it again one more time at full speed so we can appreciate all the effects in all its speed. It was kind of crazy when I was recreating it, it was like some things are very complicated, and yet it took so much time just to do something that lasts a few split seconds. Few frames, but those few frames, when you watch it back in slow motion, look really good. So let's watch it again at 1x speed. So now that I've broken down the original, let's take a look again at my recreation. alright. So it's definitely not perfect by any means, but still something I'm proud of. Some things that I couldn't exactly recreate was the distortion was different than the one in the original, but I was still very happy with the way this turned out. I decided not to do the RGB distortion on the text because I wanted to save time and just, well, finish and have something. And then this is basically a repeat, but one thing that's different here is that the timing was slightly different, so I did duplicate the first part and have to adjust the timings somewhat, but it was mostly the same. For the reflection here, what's actually being done here is I've taken this regular image of me, and then I flipped it vertically and used the pick whip tool to pair the position of the reflection to the regular version. And then I used a blur to make it look more like a reflection, and then also put a mask there with a feathered edge to make it look like it's fading away. I also used the same like pick whip to partner the different colors to the specific color channels. So each one of these is its own layer. So there's 6 layers here. There's the blue reflection, green reflection, red reflection, and each reflection is partnered to its regular version, and then also each one has its own slightly different like wiggle. For this portion, I tried to include a whole bunch, like, the original had a spinning hearts and then also like a moving circle, but I just had like a static image, so I tried to just rotate the whole thing, but also rotating it in another dimension. So it's rotating like left and right to the viewer, so the Y position, or Y rotation, and then also it's rotating, I believe it's Z, so it's kind of tilting from left to right. Boom. There are some mistakes here, so you can see, for example, the mask that's cut into 3. Here I cut it so it's left side here, top side here, and then right side at the bottom here. And you can see that there's a small mistakes in one of the frames, I think. This frame, right here. You can see there's a bit of a white line. That's a mistake in the mask where that's the top portion that was cut out. So this is the part where it changes from being one image, or one layer, into 3 different layers. And then boom. I do the inversion, have text. I wasn't able to do the thing in the original one was, it was all black and white, and then things that were overlapping kind of like switch colors. I didn't have time to implement something like that, but I still had fun recreating this. Switch colors, boom, and then it moves over. So each layer changes its X and Y position on the flat plane, and then sort of creates this new amalgamation of like a broken face. And then the face itself is still doing the same rotation, but because now it's split into 3, it kind of looks off because none of the parts are matching with each other anymore. But it's still the same one layer underneath. It's just all the different pieces are shown separately in its own copy. Boom. So for this heart, it's actually just a copy of the ones from my regular stinger transition. I didn't include any rotation here, I just left it with the text. It's got the inversion, and then the Tyler, CC Tyler. So in the original video there's 4, but this one I just, to save time, I just left it with the regular settings, and then it became 9, and then it became 25. Boom. Ends with black just like the original, and then changes to the text coming from the right side upside down with me coming in from the top. All the appropriate transitions to all the different states, and then again for this I cloned it and then turned it upside down and then just changed the timing slightly. This part was kind of a rush right at the end. It's a glowing circle, it's just got outer glowing and blur, and then it just expands in scale, and then the text here transitions from gray to a darker gray. And that's the end. So for the distortions, it was something I had to do frame by frame, or rather I reviewed it frame by frame every time, just to make sure it looked okay, rather. even though these distortions only last a couple frames each time, it was something I really carefully reviewed because I felt that it was very important to the effect in this video. It's something you barely ever see or really get time to perceive when you're watching it at full-time speed, but some of the important details like that really matter to me. So some lessons. The original video is very complicated and took me a lot longer to get a grasp on than I thought it would. The total time spent working on this was around 8 hours or so, including looking up some tutorials, and I forgot to record a few of those hours, so when I'm showing all the work, it's probably going to be missing some portions and have some gaps. Some of these effects took hours to understand and implement, but only last for a few split seconds, yet I felt added so much to the piece. For example, the distortions, which were made up of RGB splitting, square wave distortion, and noise in my recreation. Those barely appear and are barely perceived, but I felt added so much. It took me a while to get it to a place where I was satisfied with it. This also took a lot longer than my previous Sachi Studies video, which I felt was a lot simpler to recreate, but took me about 5 or 6 hours, I think, of actual working time. One of the most important things on this video that helped me get a more in-depth understanding was the pick whip tool, which basically partners a property of one layer to another, forming an expression, partnering the layers. So for example, having the reflection match the silhouette was something that's really handy. So it's kind of like making a reference, so changes to one make a change to another. Like having things point to the same variable instead of having multiple copies, which would mean changing the motion for all of them if I changed the motion for one of them. For the reflections, I used it to copy the position, and then the reflection itself was just a mirrored copy of the original layer, but blurred and with a feathered mask to make it look like a reflection on the ground. Another important thing that was really aggravating for me was that apparently things can look quite different on full resolution preview versus half or other size previews. I thought I was having rendering issues and ended up having to redo a portion today after what I thought was the final render because it looked right on the half size preview but ended up being totally wrong on the full size. I'm not entirely sure what caused it, but I was able to resolve it by recreating the same layers in a different fashion. So once again, I thought that this was a very fun and useful experience, and normally I would try to aim to do something completely original, or at least somewhat original, with the skills that I learned from the recreation, but this time, because this was so complicated and so in-depth, I had a lot of fun with the recreation and decided to commit to doing the recreation, rather than having a half-done recreation and a half-good original animation. So I committed to the recreation, and I'm really proud and happy with the way it turned out. It's not exactly a one-to-one of the original, which I think shouldn't be my aim anyway, but I think it was a very nice, well-done recreation. It was interesting to do, and I definitely want to continue doing the Sachi Studies video. I hope you enjoy this, and I'm definitely looking forward to making another video like this in the near future. I hope you had fun watching this, and I'll see you next time.